My name is Audrey Marshall, and I am in Meredith Pitt's Aging Process class for Gerentology 200, Section 1. Today I'm going to be talking about the results from our Fraboni scales, the ageism test. So basically, to kind of set the scene, I'm going to talk about my results first. So when we first started the class, my first Fraboni scale test I took, I ended up getting a 54. And so basically, I was kind of surprised with how low of a score that was already just starting out. But then I was even more surprised that by the end of the semester, by taking this class and also with the help of my social work classes, I was able to get a 45, which is quite a difference. And I think the reason why I had some changes was because I was able to understand the questions a little bit better. When I first took the test, I was kind of surprised with some of the questions, or I didn't really know how to fully answer them because some of the terms were a little bit new to me, or I just was a little bit confused as to what it was asking. But as we went through the semester and talked through the different themes and stuff that was in the questions, I think I was able to get a better understanding. So one of the questions that I think I definitely changed from the beginning to the end was the question about like there should be special clubs set aside within sports facilities so that the old people can compete at their own level. So at first I was like, yeah, that's a great idea, because then that way, you know, they can feel like they have something of their own, which I also think is important. But then again, as I thought about it, it is kind of a little bit discriminatory, kind of like separating that older population from the younger population. So then when I looked at my scores and my test results, I agreed with that question on the first one, and I disagreed on the second one, which I kind of laughed at myself. Just because I could see the difference of, okay, I had one thought process of it being, oh, this could be a really good thing, that they would be able to have their own facility. And then I was like, well, maybe that's not a good thing. It might be better to integrate them so they don't feel so separate. So I kind of noticed that theme throughout my personal results as they changed. But I was also interested when I did the interviews, what people kind of thought about those questions, and I'll get into that in a little bit. So I ended up doing a total of 4 interviews. My first 2 interviews were with the youthful aging. So I interviewed a 22-year-old, and her results ended up getting an 88. And then I interviewed a 26-year-old, and his results were a 99. Now, it may be a little bit more of my error as an interviewer. I chose people who were very negative about the aging population, and so that may have skewed some of my results a little bit, because those were kind of high, especially when we talked about it in class. We talked about, you know, our generation, the youthful generation, typically sees scores, I believe, from like 50 to 70 range. So these are definitely kind of high, and so that may have been an error on my end because I chose people who were extremely negative towards the aging population. But it gave me some good, interesting conversation that, again, I'll get to here in a little bit. The second people that I had interviewed were actually both my grandmothers. They were part of the old population. So my 78-year-old grandmother scored a 55, and my other grandmother scored a 47. Now, I was pretty impressed with both of those scores because they're actually really similar to my scores. So with them being in that older population, I thought, wow, like they have a really good grasp on, you know, the aging population and what it feels like. They probably talk to their friends and have like their own community, so they do have a better understanding and grasp on what that looks like. Plus, they have the experience. So I definitely was surprised by the results from both of the old aging and the young aging. When I had asked all four of them the question of do they think ageism is an issue in their community, all across the board they said yes. And again, I was surprised by that because I had these two scores, which were pretty high, both of them telling me yes, even though that their information that they perceived and how they view the community is very negative, they still thought that was an issue. So I guess that is a good thing because they recognize that ageism is an issue, but they themselves feel like they can't really do anything about it, is kind of what I perceived from both of them. So I thought that was kind of interesting, especially coming from the younger population. I also was wondering if maybe they have had some bad experiences growing up with some elderly. I know when I had asked the 22-year-old about kind of like how she viewed aging, she herself isn't really a fan of her grandparents, and I think it's just because maybe she doesn't see them as much, and they tend to annoy her, she said. So I think a lot of that depends on your experience and growing up, and also how your parents view aging too is a big contributing factor to how you're going to perceive it as well. And then I also asked kind of that same question to both my grandmothers, kind of about like how they felt about the aging population and if they found it was an issue, ageism was an issue in their community. And they both also said yes. Now, it's important to point out that my grandma, who scored a 47, she is a part of a senior citizen center where they do a lot of activities and stuff. So she definitely gets a really good perception of kind of all ranges of senior citizens, basically anyone from like 60 years of age, like, and some of them are even like 90, maybe even 100. So she sees a really big range of age population in that community. And so her perspective of ageism and what she sees them go through, as well as herself, I think gives her a broader, kind of like a broader knowledge about what kind of goes on in the community of aging. So I definitely think those programs that my grandma is involved in, like, helps herself understand ageism. Now, I will also point out that ageism was kind of a new term for everyone that I interviewed, so it was fun for me to walk them through what it meant. And then now that I have done those interviews, even though I interviewed two people who are extremely negative about it, they now have that knowledge of, okay, ageism is a process, and maybe they'll kind of like think, or is a problem, sorry. They'll think that ageism is a problem, and that now they will probably see that a little bit more frequently, since they have that new term of knowledge in their head. So when they see something, or if they themselves say something, it'll probably still go off in their head like, oh wait, Audrey talked about ageism and how I shouldn't be saying mean things about the elderly. So again, I was surprised with the gap between the two. Like, it's just a significant gap. Like, I was very shocked by that, and I was not expecting that going into this. But overall, I think that the interviews went really well. My grandmas both perceived the questions pretty well. I had to explain a few things to them, and I know that there were a few questions that they were shocked about. And those questions were, sorry, let me see if I can find them here. Here we go. The questions that they were shocked about were, number one, because it was talking about teenage suicide is more tragic than suicide among the old. And basically everyone I interviewed was kind of like, I don't really know how to answer this because it's both a problem. So I just told them to answer what makes them feel is the best response for that. And then I know both of my grandmas were offended at question 16, where it asks, most old people should not be trusted to take care of infants. both grandmas were instantly offended because they absolutely love their grandbabies. And my sister actually just had a kid, so my grandmas both love on my niece, and so they were very offended that, you know, people could even maybe question leaving an infant in the care of the elderly or themselves. So they were both like very offended by that. And then also my grandmas both were a little caught off guard with the question 17, where many old people are happiest with people of their own age. And they both responded, yes, but I would much prefer be with the younger population. I know that they both absolutely love when their grandkids, including myself, come and visit them. They absolutely love talking to us, and they said that it makes them feel more alive and more youthful with having us around. So I definitely think that that is a common thing that I have learned throughout this class this semester, is that the older population absolutely adores the younger population. So how can we kind of fix moving on? Basically, what I took away from this and how maybe we can implement some education systems moving forward is kind of, first of all, know your own bias and how you perceive it. But I think it would be important if we started education programs within our schools that focus on the youth. If they learn at a young age that ageism is an issue, and if we try to redefine ageism into a more positive light, I think that would definitely help with generations moving forward. So if we had those education, like either programs or, you know, taking a couple classes or something as we grew up throughout our elementary education and even on through high school, we as a younger generation would understand how much of an issue ageism is and how we can change that, so that we don't get scores that are drastic like this. I think it would be important to try to redefine aging and make it more of a positive thing than a negative thing. And it's not going to be something that's taken care of overnight, because redefining an issue takes a lot of time. But basically also word of mouth. There's a lot that can be said by word of mouth. And even with me just interviewing these 4 people, I was able to get them to understand what ageism is and what ageism looks like. And so now that they know that piece of information, they also may be able to spread that on to their friends and their communities and their families. And so that's, you know, that could rack up to 50 people or more who understand at least the basic knowledge of what ageism is. So I definitely think word of mouth would be really helpful. So another thing that I took away from this was making it a conversation. Not everyone knows the term ageism, so I just was able to take away from the fact that I was able to converse with these people and just talk about it. Like, I had so much fun talking about it with them and making sure that they also understood the questions and what ageism actually looks like. So, with that being said, we're going to wrap this up, but again, here are my results. I definitely think it pays off to be educated and understand what ageism means, and I think that as long as we keep talking about it, more and more people will find out, and we will be able to make that change. Thank you.